Morning and welcome to Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is complexity and resilience. And we're going to talk about living systems, of which we are one, and how complexity serves us. So it should be a stimulating conversation. As usual, you guys always make it a stimulating conversation. Good morning, Gia. Welcome. It's great to have you here with us. Before we get started, though, in our conversation, let's take a minute or two to get present. So let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding into your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light, lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, and creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and slowly rub your fingers against your palms and feel the delicious tingling and tickling and that wonderful sensation, and allow it to bring you present right here, right now, in this moment, in your marvelous body that enables you to experience life. Welcome. So good to be here with you on this Friday. The weeks just fly by. I don't know if that's the case for you, but boy, oh boy, it's just amazing how quickly time flies. Anyway, today's talk or conversation is about complexity and resilience. And this comes from Rosalind. Good morning, Rosalind says TGIF. So yeah, thank God it's Friday, right? Let's look at this idea of complexity. We're talking about natural systems. So one of the things that I see in our culture is that we have taken a reductionist view of so much of our existence, where we've looked at things in terms of a machine, and that machine has limited parts, right? And A turns B. Good morning, Robin. Welcome. Good to have you here with us. So we're talking about complexity kind of versus reductionism and oversimplification. So for instance, if you're having a problem with your heart, or you're having a problem with your kidneys or whatever, we treat the organ, we treat the symptoms rather than looking at the system. And I think that as we are facing really extreme challenges on our planet, in the world, we need to look more deeply into the complexity of the system, like where the systems interact with each other and the broader world, and see the bigger picture. And this topic came about because last night on the Sustainability Now movie night, which you guys are all invited to join us. I mean, these movie nights are wonderful. We show sometimes we show the interviews that we do. Sometimes we show other films. And last night we showed a presentation and interview with Paul Hawken, who is just this brilliant, amazing guy who he did a project where he got a whole bunch of scientists together and they went through an assessment to determine the 100 most substantive solutions to draw down carbon and reverse global warming, essentially. Pretty profound thing. So you can look up Paul Hawken, Hawken, and Project Drawdown. And now he's moved on from that to regeneration. And the thing about regeneration is that it has to do with honoring complexity. And we see that on all levels, systems really are complex, and oversimplifying them does damage to the systems. And I want to look at how we can apply that to ourselves as well as the world. So good morning, Catherine. So good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about resilience and complexity. And so Robin says they treat the physical general ailment instead of what the root cause is. Exactly. This is because we have been conditioned to believe that we live in a mechanistic universe where it's like cogs in a wheel, and it's predictable, and it's more mechanical than it is organic. And Rosalind says using logic and equipment to take input and produce an output is limited. Maybe in a complex system, you can use a separate metric to measure and alarm when a certain threshold, low or high level, is reached. Yeah, so there are distinct advantages to be able to systematize things and to be able to understand the mechanics of things. But the thing is that we live in a world of what Regenesis, which is a really, really cool organization dealing with regenerative development of the world, really. We live within nested holes. So we have the whole of our system, our individual, our individual physical manifestation, and then that system is maybe living within a family system, and we're living within a community system within a building that is within a neighborhood that is within a city. You get the idea. So I'm looking at how we can be applying this notion of complexity and nested holes to ourselves so that we can thrive better, so that we can enjoy life more fully. And so this is the first time that I'm actually thinking about this, and I'm excited to be thinking about it with you guys. So Rosalind, what you're talking about is within a system to get a feedback loop, right? To get a greater feedback loop when certain thresholds are reached, for instance. So when we look at ourselves, we might tend to oversimplify things. like when we think about who we are, we compartmentalize, right? Like if we've done something that we don't feel good about, that thing can often come to define us, for us to believe that that's who we are. And or else we pack it away and deny it completely to not be able to integrate it within ourselves. And we've been talking about integrating the shadow, we've been talking about trauma, we've been talking about honoring the parts of ourselves that we've transformed beyond. And I think that this is the next level of considering our own growth, to not oversimplify who we are and how we operate. So what does that mean? What does that look like? We've talked about, as we metabolize these different parts of ourselves, that's how we become whole. It's an oversimplification to say I'm a good person, for example. What does that mean, right? And if I'm a good person, then if I do something or say something that doesn't align with my idea of what good is, either I need to get rid of that thing because it doesn't line up with my notion of who I am being good, or it shatters my notion of who I am, right? So when we, and maybe that's not a bad thing if we think I'm a good person, because that's very one-dimensional, right? It's not an enrichment, it's not a rich expression of who we are. There are times when I'm a good person, and I'm putting good in big air quotes, where I fit my ideal or idea of what a good person might be. Or there are times when I do or say things that maybe don't fit that box, maybe don't fit inside that box. So then what? How do I integrate those parts of myself? How do I find forgiveness for myself? Good morning, Lisa. Welcome. It's good to have you here with us. It's great to have all of you here with us. I love that we're connected and knowing each other. So I'm just playing with this idea. When we recognize that we are complex beings, that we're not one-dimensional, that we have all these different aspects. When we recognize that we can be any of it, and that we truly are all of it, when we accept that, then there's an ability to be more resilient. So if we have this singular idea of I'm a good person, and then something happens that challenges that, it can shatter that whole thing. And then how do we come back? Because we've created this false metric, this false measure for ourselves, that is one-dimensional. I mean, it may sound like it's a good thing to strive to be a good person, but what does it mean to be a good person? What does it mean? We don't necessarily look at the complexity that might be underlying that. It's like black and white. And when we reduce things, again, the idea of a reductionist view, when we reduce things to good and bad, then there's a whole spectrum of living that occurs. I mean, you're talking about points on the extreme ends of a line, for instance, and you're missing everything in between. And it's not even a line, it's more like an orb, right? So Catherine says we have to love ourselves. So we make mistakes, but we need to love ourselves. Yes. And it's not, but we need to love ourselves. It's, and we need to love ourselves. And when we look at what we consider mistakes, we also get to look at what is the measure by which we're determining that something is a mistake. You know, when we speak, welcome, Sophia, welcome. So good to have you here with us. When we speak something that we wish we would not have spoken, if we do something we wish we would not have done, the thing that, if we are holding ourselves to this unrealistic, incomplete, one-dimensional measure, then what happens is we can't find a way to metabolize our quote unquote transgressions. And so here's the thing: when we recognize that we're complex, that it's not that simple, that it's not black and white, then we have a greater resilience, because we have an ability to see ourselves with compassion, to find forgiveness, to cultivate understanding, to enrich our perspective, to broaden our perspective. Does that make sense? You know, where when we look at the bigger picture, when we stand back and get a broader view, things make a whole lot more sense, because we can see the interaction of all these different parts and pieces, and how the complexity of the system is resulting in certain responses and behaviors. Like if I snap at somebody, then I can feel really bad perhaps about having snapped at them. If I step back and see, oh my gosh, there was this pressure and that pressure and the other thing, and these old triggers, and now I can see that in context and say, oh wow, of course I snapped. Look what was at play. And then I get to clean it up with the other person, right? But in standing back, seeing the complexity of the system, it allows me the greater capacity to be generous with myself and to say, oh, I get it. You know, somebody else in that circumstance, they would have done the same thing, or they might have even done worse, or, you know, whatever it was. I can look at all these factors at play that generated that response, and then I can find a way to come back from it. You know, it gives me a way to be resilient. Whereas if I just look at that, I can say, I'm terrible, I'm awful, look how horrible, you know, what a horrible thing to do. It's, you know, and go into that deep, dark hole. And so when we're talking about complexity, we're talking about a broader view and looking at all the different things, different elements that are at play. And obviously we can do the same with other people. We talked about excuses and how excuses kind of disempower us and others. But what I'm talking about here is not excuses, but understanding and comprehension and compassion and perspective. And I think that we can tend to reduce things to black and white, right and wrong, good and bad, light and dark, all of that, you know, that by reducing things to that kind of polarity. Thank you, Catherine. Catherine says, love what you're sharing. When we reduce things to that kind of polarity, we're setting ourselves up for inaccuracies and really oversimplifying things to the point where they we take ourselves further from the truth, because the truth is is a bigger picture, right? If we can even approach the truth, it's a bigger picture. It's not just yes, no, black, white. Lisa says the result in the end of the behavior is amazing when you can step back and realize that you created what you created in that minute. Acknowledge it. You begin to change and do better. Yes, I think that's 100% true, Lisa, that awareness is the first step to change, right? But the thing is, we need to be educating that awareness with knowing that we're not an isolated entity, knowing that a behavior is not an isolated, I get that it's an isolated incident, but that it didn't come out of nowhere. There's a whole lot of stuff that happened or contributed to whatever that circumstance was. And if we can step back and see that, then we can have greater access to ways to shift or modulate it. And so here's an example from Regenesis. And I kind of love this. So Catherine says, some people we have to distance ourselves from. You can't change, you can't change others. And we must have respect for our own being. Exactly. So we can't change others. We can change the way that we are. When we change, it's remarkable how in coaching, I notice, and my clients notice that when they change, it's miraculous how everybody around them changes, and this is a really fascinating phenomena, that when we change, people around us change. Why is that? Because when we change the way that we interact with people. We're different in our interactions, and when we're different in our interactions, the way that people respond to us is different, right? So it's remarkable that, and this is also talking about complexity, right? When we notice that our change has it bubbles out around us, it percolates, right? And it creates a different dynamic. And when this is complexity, that it's not just this person is this way and I'm this way, and this is what happens when we communicate or don't communicate very well. A shift within me, does it change who I am as a person? Or is it shifting my behavior? Whatever, it's creating other ripples down the road, right? So Rosalind says, does stepping back look like I am not my thoughts, I am not the body, and give way to how do you want to think and feel? I love that, Rosalind. Stepping back can look like I am not my thoughts, I have my thoughts. I am not my body, I inhabit my body. I think that when I'm not my emotions, I experience these emotions. Like, in other words, these things don't define me. They may be part of me, but they don't define me. They are part of what makes my presence in the world, but they don't define my essence. Lisa says, to quote Carole King, I love Carole King, people going to treat you better. You're going to find, yes, you will, that you're beautiful as you feel. I love that, Lisa. So this is another way, you know, that we can say, I'm beautiful. Well, what does that mean? You know, so we can, it's a complex thing. Some people who are not physically attractive necessarily have the most remarkable spirit, which makes them radiantly beautiful, right? So there's not necessarily an objective measure of what beauty might be, for example, right? So again, this is with all of our judgments and our thoughts and interpretations, when we recognize that that it's not just a simple yes or no, then we can, there's room for recovery, because there are all these different avenues, you know, rather than this is who I am. And then if something happens that challenges that, we fall apart. When we recognize that we're these incredibly complex beings with all these different things going on, we can find a space of, I think we can find a deeper place of compassion and understanding. So Catherine says, it's hard with some I love. It's hard with some I love all, because not loving just hurts me. I'm not, well, I agree that not loving is painful. When we're angry, when we're hurt, when we're hateful, that's hurting us for sure, for sure. And Lisa replying to Rosalind says, yes, yes, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my body. How do we want to think and feel? And I love the love fest that's going back and forth between you guys. Catherine says, people with light within scare people. That's an interesting thought. I think that I think that that's true in some instances. So Catherine says, darkness does not love light. Yeah, darkness may flee from the light and try to squash the light or try to extinguish the light. That can happen for sure. And I think that there are more and more people that are lighting up more and more. And we don't have to be the high intensity directed light like you would have in an interrogation, for instance, right? We can be a radiant light, and that kind of light is a whole lot easier to receive than a spotlight glaring in your eyes, right? So there are different ways to be the light too. And I always say light trumps dark every time. And if we remember that, and we remember to shine our light, and Catherine says unconditional love. Yeah, that's a challenge. Unconditional love is a challenge for a lot of folks. And there are moments that we flow into that space of unconditional love. Those are blissful moments. And if we can recognize where we're holding our conditions, then perhaps we can begin to release them. So, hello, Will, welcome. I don't think I've seen you here before. How wonderful to have you chiming in. So Will says, I find that people don't really understand how people who shine their light work. They don't understand, so they condemn. I think that's true in a lot of cases. I think you're exactly right in a lot of cases. Um, people people can often feel threatened by people who are really shining, and they just want to dim that light because it's too much of a contrast between themselves and the people who are shining. So I it can be a challenge to continue to shine your light in the face of that, right? And that's what we get to do. Light trumps dark. It does. And hopefully those people, we shed light. We talked about this before too. We shed light. And as we shed light, even those people that don't understand it or condemn it, they're receiving that light on some level. So maybe at some point they switch, some point they light up, some point they get ignited, hopefully too, right? So Lisa says there was an old movie called The Cottage. It's about a man who hates himself due to a war injury. The cottage caretaker is not attractive. They hide at the cottage, but when they meet, they see the absolute. Okay, wait. It's about a man who hates himself. The cottage caretaker is not attractive. They hide at the cottage, but when they meet, they see the absolute beauty in each other. I guess this is the man at the caretaker and the man who hates himself. For the first time, they realize it's the others, not them. It sounds like a really beautiful story, to recognize that that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and our own beauty, right, is a matter. Beauty is a matter of appreciation, right, and recognition, and it's not necessarily based on physicalness at all, because there are some physically beautiful people that are just ugly in the way that they live in the world. Yeah, Lisa says, yeah, I didn't say it right, but I think you know what I mean. I think we do know what you mean. That again, it's more complex, right? So I'm just playing with the ideas about how we want to make things, keep it simple, right? KISS, keep it simple, stupid. But it's not necessarily simple, or there's a richness, a complexity to things that is very, very much tied to our ability to be resilient. So Catherine says, when out passing strangers, I feel people's goodness. It's amazing. So Catherine, it's beautiful to hear you saying that. I have to run. I have a plumber here. So I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. So much love to you, and have a wonderful weekend. And I look forward to seeing you here.